"You're a burden," he snarls, shoving her chair into the underbrush. She tumbles to the ground, mud splattering her clothes. Rain drips from overgrown leaves as a car skids to a stop on a muddy path. A man, Harry, mid-40s, face twisted in frustration, hauls his disabled wife, Emily, late 30s, from the passenger seat. She's wheelchair-bound, legs useless from a recent accident, eyes wide with betrayal. "You're a burden," he snarls, shoving her chair into the underbrush. She tumbles to the ground, mud splattering her clothes. He drives off, leaving her alone in the darkening woods. She crawls, calling weakly, "Harry, please." Unseen in the shadows, a mysterious man watches, tall, cloaked, eyes sharp with intent. Who is he? And what will he do now that he's witnessed everything? In the quiet suburbs of a small town, Harry and Emily's marriage had once been the envy of their neighbors. He, a successful real estate agent with charming smile. She, a vibrant teacher who lit up rooms with her laughter. But an accident changed everything. A drunk driver slamming into Emily's car, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. Recovery was slow, painful. Harry promised forever, "I'll carry you through this." But as medical bills mounted and Emily's needs grew, his patience frayed. Whispers from friends, "He's struggling." Harry's late nights at work turned into excuses. Emily sensed a shift. "We can get through this," she said one evening, reaching for his hand. He pulled away. "Can we?" Deep in the forest nearby lived Elias, a reclusive woodsman in his 50s, scarred by his own past losses, watching the world from afar. The first year after the accident was bearable. Harry still carried Emily upstairs when the elevator in their apartment building broke. He still kissed her forehead before leaving for work. He still told her, in tired but sincere tones, that they would get through it together. But the second year cracked the surface. Medical bills arrived faster than Harry's commissions. The house they once loved now felt like a prison. Ramps bolted the stairs, grab bars in the bathroom, a wheelchair that scraped against door frames. Emily tried to stay positive. She read books on resilience, joined online support groups, even started a small blog about living with paralysis. Harry read none of it. He began staying late at open houses, coming home smelling of wine and perfume that wasn't hers. When Emily asked gentle questions, he snapped, "I'm working, Em. Someone has to pay for all this." Emily learned to swallow her hurt. She learned to wheel herself to the kitchen, to make coffee she couldn't carry back to bed, to smile when he walked in at midnight and barely looked at her. One evening she tried again. "We could try couples therapy. Just to talk." Harry laughed, short, bitter. "Talk? About what?" "How my life ended the day yours did." Emily flinched as though slapped. "I didn't ask for this." He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment regret flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. "No," he said quietly. "You didn't." But the seed was planted. In the forest 20 miles away, Elias lived in near silence. His cabin had no electricity beyond a small solar panel, no internet, no neighbors. He had moved there after losing his wife and son to a house fire years earlier. Guilt kept him away from people. The forest kept him sane. He patrolled the trails daily, not for exercise, but to feel something like purpose. He noticed every broken branch, every tire track, every sign of human intrusion. He had seen Harry's car before. Always the same model, always the same route, always the same man behind the wheel. Alone. Harry planned it over weeks, telling himself it wasn't abandonment. It was mercy. Emily would be found eventually. Someone would help her. He would be free. He chose a Sunday in late autumn when the forest was empty. He told Emily they were going for a drive to clear their heads. She believed him. She dressed carefully, warm sweater, favorite scarf, a small hope that maybe this was a day things turn around. Harry drove in silence. Emily tried to fill it. Remember when we used to drive to the coast just to watch the waves? He grunted. Yeah. The road narrowed. Trees closed in. Emily's smile faded. Harry, where are we? He pulled onto a dirt path barely wide enough for the car. Stopped. Got out. Opened her door. Out, he said. Emily stared. What? He reached in, unbuckled her, dragged her wheelchair from the trunk, unfolded it roughly. Then he lifted her, roughly, and set her in the chair. She grabbed his arm. Harry, stop. You're scaring me. He looked down at her, eyes cold, voice flat. You're a burden, Em. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. Emily's face crumpled. Please, we can fix it. I'll try harder. He shoved the chair forward into the underbrush. It tipped. She fell hard into wet leaves and mud. Harry stood over her for a second, breathing hard. You'll be okay. Someone will find you. He turned, got back in the car, and drove away. Emily lay on her side, rain falling on her face, whispering his name over and over until her voice broke. From a ridge 30 yards away, Elias watched the entire scene through binoculars. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He lowered the lenses slowly. Then he started down the slope. Emily's world became mud, cold, and pain. She dragged herself toward the overturned wheelchair, arms shaking, fingers numb. Rain soaked through her sweater, her scarf, her skin. She reached the chair, pulled herself up inch by inch until she was sitting again. Her legs, useless since the accident, hung like dead weight. She looked around. Trees in every direction. No road visible. No sound except rain and her own ragged breathing. Why? She whispered to the empty forest. Why would you do this? She tried to will forward, but the ground was too soft. Wheels spun uselessly. Panic rose in her throat. She screamed once, raw, desperate. Help! Please! Nothing answered. Darkness fell fast. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slowly. She thought of her mother, long dead, her students, who used to call her Mrs. Sunshine, Harry's face when he used to smile at her. She cried until she had no tears left. Then she heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. A tall man stepped out of the trees. Gray hair tied back, scarred hands, eyes that had seen too much. Emily flinched. Who are you? The man crouched a respectful distance away. Name's Elias. I live here. Saw what happened. Emily stared at him, hope and fear warring in her chest. Did you see him leave me? Elias nodded once. I did. He stood, offered his hand. Come on. My cabin's not far. You'll freeze out here. Emily hesitated only a second. She had no choice. She took his hand. Elias's cabin was small but warm. Log walls, wood-burning stove, shelves lined with jars of dried herbs, books, and old photographs. A single bed in the corner, a table, 2 chairs. No electricity beyond a lantern and a small solar lamp. He helped Emily inside, set her chair near the fire, draped a thick wool blanket over her shoulders. She shivered violently. You're safe, he said quietly. No one's coming through that door unless I let them. Emily clutched the blanket. Why are you helping me? Elias poured hot water into a mug, added tea leaves. Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. He handed her the mug. Their fingers brushed. His hands were rough, warm. Emily sipped, eyes never leaving his face. You live here alone? 23 years. No family? A shadow crossed his expression. Had a wife. A son. House fire. I got out. They didn't. Emily's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Elias shrugged, but the pain was still raw. Guilt keeps me here. Keeps me watching. Makes sure no one else gets left like that. He sat across from her. You're not the first person I've pulled out of these woods, but you're the first one whose husband put her here on purpose. Emily stared into the fire. He said I was a burden. Elias's voice hardened. He's wrong. Silence stretched between them. Comfortable, not awkward. Emily looked at him. What happens now? Elias met her gaze steadily. Now you heal. Then we decide what comes next. Harry returned to an empty house. He called 911 from the driveway, voice shaking with rehearsed panic. My wife! She's missing. We argued. She got upset. I thought she went for a walk, but she's in a wheelchair. She can't have gone far. Police arrived quickly. Search parties formed. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers. Harry played the devastated husband perfectly. Tears, trembling hands, endless apologies to neighbors. Inside, he drank until he passed out on the couch. Meanwhile, in the cabin, Emily slept for 14 hours straight, the first deep sleep she'd had since the accident. When she woke, Elias was outside chopping wood. She wheeled to the door. You don't have to do all this. Elias paused, axe resting on his shoulder. I want to. Emily looked around at the clean floors, the ramp he'd built overnight from scrap lumber, so she could move freely. You're a good man. He gave a small, sad smile. I'm trying to be. That evening they sat by the fire again. Elias told her about the forest, how it had saved him when nothing else could. Emily told him about teaching, how children's laughter used to be her favorite sound. For the first time since the accident, she laughed, small, hesitant, but real. Elias watched her, something softening in his eyes. Outside, the search continued. Harry waited for news, dread and relief warring inside him. But Emily was no longer in the forest alone, and Elias was no longer watching from the shadows. Weeks passed in the cabin like pages turning slowly in a book no one else was reading. Emily's body ached from the fall and from months of disuse, but Elias was patient. He carved a wider path from the cabin door to the small clearing, so her wheelchair could move without catching roots. He boiled pine needles for tea that eased her nerve pain. He taught her how to tell time by the position of shadows through the trees. They spoke little at first. Emily spent mornings by the window, watching birds she could now name thanks to Elias's quiet lessons. Afternoons, she helped where she could, peeling vegetables with a small knife, folding blankets, reading aloud from the worn paperbacks on a shelf when her hands weren't too stiff. Elias watched her without staring. He noticed how she still flinched at sudden noises, how she sometimes whispered Harry's name in her sleep, like a question she couldn't answer. He noticed how her eyes lit up when she successfully rolled a log closer to the fire without asking for help. One evening, as rain drummed on the tin roof, Emily looked up from the book she was reading. You don't have to keep me here, you know. I could figure something out. Elias sat across from her, sharpening a knife with slow, deliberate strokes. Where would you go? Emily looked down at her lap. Back to town. The police. My sister in Ohio, maybe. He set the knife aside. You could, But you're not ready. Not yet. She met his eyes. And you? Are you ready to have someone in your space after 23 years alone? A long silence. Then Elias gave the smallest of smiles. I'm getting used to the company. Emily smiled back, small, tentative, but real. That night she dreamed of Harry's face in the car window, receding. She woke crying. Elias appeared in the doorway with a lantern. Bad dream. She nodded, wiping her face. He said I was a burden. Elias crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. You're not a burden. You're a person, and people deserve to be treated like people. Emily reached out and touched his wrist, brief, grateful. Thank you for seeing me. He covered her hand with his. You're easy to see. Back in town, Harry played the grieving husband with practiced precision. He gave tearful interviews to local news. She was upset. We argued. I thought she needed space. I never imagined. Neighbors brought casseroles. Colleagues sent flowers. The police searched the forest daily, but Elias's cabin was deep in a section few maps showed. Harry began to believe he might actually get away with it. At night, alone in their too-quiet house, guilt crept in like damp rot. He stared at Emily's empty wheelchair in the corner. He poured whiskey until the room spun. Sometimes he whispered her name like an apology he could never deliver. One afternoon a detective visited. We found tire tracks matching your car on an old logging road. Care to explain? Harry forced a shaky laugh. I told you we went for a drive. She got upset. I dropped her at a cafe. I thought she caught a ride. The detective's eyes narrowed. We'll keep looking. Harry smiled weakly. Thank you. But when the door closed, he sank to the floor and wept for himself, for Emily, for a man he used to be. Emily's strength returned slowly. Elias made her a pair of forearm crutches from ash wood. At first, she could only stand for seconds, then minutes. One morning, she took 3 shaky steps across the cabin floor. Elias watched in the doorway, arms crossed. You're stubborn. Emily laughed breathlessly. You're a good teacher. Later that day, she ventured outside alone for the first time. She wheeled along the path Elias had cleared, breathing in pine and wet earth. She stopped at a small stream and listened to the water, really listened. For the first time since the accident, she felt something like peace. Elias found her there. You look different. She looked up at him. I feel different. Like, maybe I can start again. He crouched beside her chair. You already have. Emily reached out and touched the scar on his forearm, a burn mark from a fire. You never talk about them. Your wife, your son. Elias stared at the water. Her name was Clara. Our boy was Jonah, 6 years old. I was at work when the fire started. Faulty wiring. By the time I got home, he trailed off. Emily's voice was soft. I'm sorry. He looked at her. I spent years punishing myself. Then I found this place. Found a way to live with the guilt. And then you showed up. Emily smiled faintly. Maybe we're both here to stop punishing ourselves. Elias reached over and brushed a leaf from her hair. Maybe. Radio reports filtered into the cabin. Harry was now a person of interest. Evidence of emotional abuse surfaced. Neighbors recalling arguments. Emily's old friends mentioning how withdrawn she'd become. Emily listened in silence. When the broadcast ended, she looked at Elias. I have to go back. He nodded. I know. They drove into town at dawn. Emily sat tall in the passenger seat, crutches across her lap. Elias parked a block from the police station. Inside, Emily wheeled herself to the front desk. "I'm Emily Carter. I believe you're looking for me." The room froze. Officers stared. A detective rushed over. Harry was brought in an hour later. When he saw Emily sitting there, alive, upright, staring at him with calm eyes, he collapsed into a chair. "Emily," she spoke evenly, "you left me to die." Harry's voice broke. "I didn't mean I thought someone would find you. You didn't care if they did." Harry sobbed. Emily didn't flinch. Elias stood by the door, arms crossed, watching silently. Emily turned to the detective. "I want to press charges. Abandonment, attempted murder, whatever fits." Harry looked up, pleading. "Emily, please." She met his gaze one last time. "You made your choice. Now live with it." Harry's trial was swift. Neighbors testified to his growing coldness. Medical records showed he had canceled Emily's physical therapy appointments without telling her. Phone logs revealed calls to a woman he'd been seeing for months. He was sentenced to 7 years. Emily did not attend the sentencing. She stayed in the cabin with Elias, helping him expand the small garden behind the house. They built a greenhouse together. She wrote letters to her students, started teaching online from the cabin's small desk. One evening, as fireflies blinked in the clearing, Elias sat beside her on the porch swing he had built. "You could go back to the city," he said quietly. "Start over. You're strong enough now." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am starting over. Right here." He wrapped an arm around her. "You sure?" She looked up at him. "I've never been more sure." He kissed her forehead, gentle, reverent. Emily whispered against his shirt, "You watched over me when no one else did." Elias's voice was rough with emotion. "And you reminded me I could still care." They sat in silence as the stars came out. Two people who had both been abandoned by life, now choosing each other in the quiet of the forest. The divorce was final within 4 months. Harry signed the papers without contesting anything. Perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of fear that Emily would testify in open court about the night he left her in the mud. The judge granted her full ownership of the house, a modest alimony settlement, and a restraining order that kept him at least 500 feet away. Emily chose not to keep the house. Too many memories lived in those walls, good ones that had soured, bad ones that had festered. She sold it quickly and used the money to buy a small piece of land adjacent to Elias's cabin. 5 acres of forest, a narrow stream, and enough flat ground to build a proper accessible home. Elias helped her plan every detail. Wide doorways, no thresholds, a roll-in shower, a kitchen counter at wheelchair height. They worked side by side, Elias hammering, Emily directing from her chair or standing for short stretches on the forearm crutches he had made her. Neighbors from nearby homesteads occasionally stopped by with food or tools, curious about the quiet woman who had appeared out of nowhere and the reclusive woodsman who had suddenly started smiling again. One afternoon, while they stained the new porch railing, Emily paused. "I never asked if this was okay with you." Elias looked up, brush dripping. "What?" "Me staying, building here, taking up space in your forest." He set the brush down and walked over, crouching so they were eye level. "You didn't take anything. You gave me something back. Company, laughter, a reason to fix the roof instead of just patching leaks." Emily reached out and touched his cheek, rough with stubble, warm from the sun. "I want this to be our home, not just mine." Elias covered her hand with his. "Then it is." That evening they sat on the unfinished porch watching fireflies rise from grass. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. I used to think love was loud. Flowers, dates, big gestures. But this quiet, it's better. Elias kissed the top of her head. Quiet suits us. Harry's criminal trial was brief but brutal. The prosecutor painted a clear picture. A husband who had systematically isolated his disabled wife, drained their joint accounts, carried on an affair, and finally abandoned her in a remote forest to die. Emily testified from her wheelchair in the front row, voice steady, eyes dry. I loved him once, she said. But love doesn't leave someone to freeze in the rain. Harry stared at the table the entire time. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he only shook his head. He was sentenced to 8 years for attempted murder and aggravated abandonment, with eligibility for parole after 5. The courtroom was silent as he was led away in cuffs. Afterward, Emily met Elias outside the courthouse. He had waited in the parking lot, refusing to step inside a building full of people. She wheeled up to him. It's done. He nodded once. You okay? Emily exhaled. I thought I'd feel more. Anger. Relief. Something big. But I just feel finished. Elias crouched beside her chair. That's enough. They drove back to the forest in silence. That night, Emily lit a small fire in the yard and burned the last photo she had kept of her and Harry. Wedding day. Both smiling like the future was certain. She watched the flames until nothing remained but ash. Elias stood behind her, hands on her shoulders. You're free. Emily reached up and covered his hand with hers. We both are. Spring arrived with soft green shoots and longer days. Emily's mobility continued to improve. Physical therapy in town twice a week. Daily exercises Elias designed using fallen logs and resistance bands he made from old inner tubes. She could now stand for 10 minutes at a time, walk short distances with crutches, even manage a few steps without support. She started a small online business. Handmade herbal salves and teas using plants Elias had taught her to identify and harvest sustainably. Orders came slowly at first, then steadily. Women wrote her messages. Your story helped me leave my own bad situation. Your products ease my chronic pain. Emily answered every one. Elias watched her thrive with quiet pride. He began speaking more, stories of his childhood, his marriage, the fire. Emily listened without judgment, holding space for his grief the way he had held space for hers. One warm afternoon, while they planted blueberry bushes behind the cabin, Elias stopped digging. Emily. She looked up, dirt on her cheek. Yeah. He set the shovel aside and knelt in front of her chair. I've spent most of my life thinking love was something that happened once and then got burned away. But you walked, rode into my woods and proved me wrong. He pulled a small wooden ring from his pocket. Carved from ash, simple, polished smooth. Marry me, not because I saved you, because you saved me right back. Tears slipped down Emily's face. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They kissed under the open sky, with birds singing and wind moving through new leaves. 2 years later, the cabin had become 2 cabins connected by a covered walkway, Elias's original home and a new accessible wing with wide halls, a roll-in shower, and a sunroom filled with plants. Emily walked with forearm crutches most days, though she still used a chair for longer distances. She no longer saw herself as disabled. She saw herself as capable, resilient, loved. They married in the clearing behind the cabins on a perfect summer day. Only a handful of witnesses. Emily's sister, Elias's old friend from town, a local judge who doubled as officiant. Emily wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself. Elias wore a clean flannel shirt and his best jeans. Their vows were short. Emily, I promise to choose you every day, to laugh with you, to hold your grief when it comes, to build a life that feels like home. Elias, I promise to stand beside you, to carry what you can't, to love you through every season. You're my reason to stay. They exchanged rings, hers the ash one he had carved, his a matching band she had commissioned from a local jeweler. Afterward they danced, slowly, carefully, under string lights Elias had strung between the trees. Emily rested her head on his chest. I can hear your heart, she whispered. He tightened his arms around her. It's beating for you. Years passed. They never had children. Both agreed they'd found their family in each other, but they fostered strays, injured animals, lost hikers, even a teenage runaway who stayed a summer and learned to trust again. Emily's blog grew into a small community of survivors. Elias became known in town as the quiet man who always helped when someone was lost. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies, Emily leaned against him. Do you ever regret it? Taking me in? Elias kissed her temple. Only that I didn't find you sooner. She smiled into the darkness. We found each other when we were ready. The forest whispered around them, leaves rustling, owls calling, life continuing in its quiet, persistent way. Somewhere in the shadows, Elias still watched the trails. But now he watched with Emily beside him, hand in hand, two people who had been abandoned by the world and had chosen to build their own. And in that quiet corner of the woods, love proved stronger than betrayal, stronger than pain, stronger than time.